Poleaxe. He shows a series of techniques from the Poleaxe. Again, I have strong opinion that they're just really there as a development, a way for, as a reminder that, you know, use the plays of the sword in two hands, use the plays of dagger, and you will be able to fight effectively with this weapon. Obviously, the postas are designed to mirror the strong suit. You know, you see posta Donna. So now we're in a scenario where you're throwing strong attacks that can potentially defeat the armor in their own right. But he sets you up with a scenario where you've come to a crossing and he advocates, hopefully, Leanna, just check your distance. Leanna is making an attack and I want to cover it with a counter attack. Yep. I can do it this way. I can accomplish it from the other side, which is probably more common. And I can do the same plays from here, as we're going to get into, but the little footwork and distance works better if I make a crossing. She comes in, boom. Like we've seen before, I want to step on that axe, at the very least check it, put it out of play, if I can, maybe break it, maybe knock it out of her hand, and then I come up with a strike, which he calls boar's tooth, very powerful strike. Then he advocates a series of failure drills. One we've seen already before. Armor's too strong, lift the visor, go through the visor. Once the visor's up, it doesn't take much force to inflict the kind of damage I need to her face, take her out of the fight. Other options available from that crossing are simply to put her into a strong key, like such. I can also do a throw where I come in like this. And he explains that you're actually covering her visor so she can't see. And we end up in this scenario here. It can be a throw or a trip over the shaft of the axe. Other counters. Simply, again, we have an elbow push. So now we're just getting into a lot of repetition in terms of armored sword techniques, sword and two-hand techniques. It's all there. A technique that's explained, described, Leanna comes in with a powerful attack. I simply want to step off the line and hopefully bring my axe to bear on her face. One play that we can do. He also explains the very interesting dirty plays at the end where you're using poison powder to blind your opponent, or you're using a trick poleaxe to wrap around the legs and get a throw to the ground. Poleaxe. Moving on to the spear. Spear, he shows 6 guards and explains really an exchange of point. And basically, it's simple in the sense that regardless of what posta you're in, you do the same type of exchange. You cross, and then you move in with cover. He shows guard here, middle iron gate, or sorry, full iron gate, half iron gate, and then he shows fenestra. And the same thing on the other side. Fenestra, boar's tooth, and true cross. Basic concept behind the covers. Leanna's basically throwing a thrust. I want to cover and under cover move forward with a thrust, as such. And I can do this from all of my guards, some more difficult than others. Move through. Move through. More closely. Other side, same idea. Leanna comes in, across, and move through. I find this one. Cross, step through. From true cross, same idea. We're in it. One counter does work on both sides. If I come in with my thrust, Leanna makes her cover. She comes through with her attack and simply come up, move her, set her, attack aside, and go through with the butt. In Liberi, the manuscript actually looks like a spear point on the end, so whether it's double-sided spear or what, it's there. In that action, he also explains the concept of if we're very close, because as I explained earlier too, with the spear, timing and distance is vital. If I end up too close, I make my attack, boom, I can step forward, or I can do this play and step back to make distance. So that's a concept that's explained there. So spear, simple in the idea that it's just a simple exchange of point, regardless of what guard you're in. I think most of us find this is probably the guard to be in. It's the fastest exchange, the safest exchange to be in, the best way to come in. But you have other options as well. With practice, fenestra can be very good. So, spear.
So, what other things can you do with the spear?
With the spear. Well, you can initiate attacks from your guards, just the same as you can initiate attacks. So I'm from fenestra, very simple. This is where I'm going to start my attack. And I think fenestra is a good place to start attacks. It's a strong thrust, and it's point on.
Okay, so let me clarify that question. Why do you think the spear is at the last of the manuscript before the mounted section? And if we have seen in the manuscript that all the things that come before can be employed in the weapon that comes after, what else can you do with the spear?
Okay, I know where you're going now. In the mounted section, and I'll talk a little bit about the mounted section, but I'll address Brian's question first and foremost. There are other guards you can use that he shows in the mounted section. He shows this, where we're in what he calls guard of the woman. Same idea, your crossing is like such. So he shows these other guards. He shows boar's tooth in the mounted section. So, there's water. He very much shows a technique where you're on foot and you're countering a lance, stepping off the line, which I think is probably the one plate in the entire manuscript where it's like, yeah, you have to step off the line, because if you don't, you're crushed by a horse. So, but it's a technique you've already done. You've done it time and time again. It's a little more critical this time to maybe get a little bit more off the line so you don't get run down, but it's there. And then he moves into the mounted plays. In the mounted plays, it's another section where you have a wide variety of mixed weapons in scenarios which are very true to life. They're not scenarios which are applied in friendly dueling, friendly bouts. They're not techniques that are applied even in judicial duels, because they're techniques that are very much lethal. There are attacks against the horse, where you're tactically at a disadvantage. He starts off the mounted section and shows a scenario where two opponents are armed with shields and come against each other. Unlike jousting where points are up in a safe, friendly way, you bring your point down onto the target, you're riding in this scenario with your point on line. You're also crossing in a way where in jousting we tend to cross as such because it's safer. Liberi, we want to cross on this side. I engage Leanna on this side. I have my range. My ability to employ the weapon, the range, is like vastly superior. And her shield, if she has one, is less effective at coming on the side that doesn't have her shield. So he suggests that, not jousting. He also suggests if your opponent's charging at you point on, you can come down into a guard and hopefully bring it up, move it off the line, and in a single timing, hit your opponent at the same time. That's really the first plays for joust. Moves on to show other ways to hold a short lance or a spear on horseback. As such, Leanna comes at me, point on, bring it down, force my way through. He shows mixed weapons. Same idea. Guards here. He shows a guard here. He shows a guard here. He shows a guard here, which is that short tail. It's not the long and extended tail. It's the short tail on the side. Same idea. Leanna comes at me. This is a simple exchange of point, which we're going to know how to do. With the sword, it's very interesting to note against the spear, Leanna is at very much a disadvantage. Most people would assume she has a longer, more powerful weapon. Liberi knows better that the fact of the matter is I have lots of time to cover it. And the great thing about this engagement is once Leanna goes to here, the weapon is completely useless, and I have tons of time, and I've done this at speed, all the time in the world to put the point on her, hit her twice, all kinds of things. Move that point aside, it gets past your body, don't even have to think about it anymore. He does give a counter to that. Leanna doesn't know it. Counter is you can lift up your lance and use it as like a guard, as a last ditch effort. Hard to do, it's very difficult to get it. But going back to that play, he's so strongly against the fact that this is dangerous, a dangerous scenario. Leanna now has the sword, and I'm riding, and I swing around to engage her. I'm like, ugh! Leanna broke her lance in the last pass, and she's got her sword out. Liberi says that you do not want to come at her, because he knows it's so easy for her to set this aside and have. So this is where you get these real-life techniques. He's like, don't even go near her. The counter to this is to simply drop the lance down and kill the horse. That's the only thing you can do. He's that adamant about it. So if that's not real life, that's not battlefield combat, nothing is. The techniques move on and on. Sword versus sword, we get engagements. We get a number of crossings where we're just crossed. And he shows scenarios where you're hooking and moving your horse back to try to disarm. He shows counters to this. He shows the idea, same thing. Re-ride, Leanna puts her point on, and I simply want to move it aside and ride into her. And he actually braces the sword on his hip for like a huge, insane amount of force that would be delivered with that hit. He shows grappling on horseback. He shows exchanges. He shows one exchange which is like right out of Dagger, where we come to any sort of a cross and just throw a frenente. Doesn't matter how we engage. We cross, and now we're close together, and you're simply bringing your arm down and keep on riding, and you take him off the horse. He shows a counter to this. He shows a grapple where you actually grab the reins of the horse, and you are actually wrestling the horse at this point. You bring the horse's head back on itself, twisting its neck back, and you can actually make the horse roll over on itself. So those are techniques. He shows a stirrup grab and a counter to a stirrup grab. And I know I've never seen this alleged James Bond movie, but apparently it's in a James Bond movie. So there's a stirrup grab. Very much like any of your leg grabs, you're going down, you're grabbing a structure that's strong, and you're bringing the guy up. These plays make me believe again that his techniques, the mounted section, also the way the horses are drawn. Very few of them, only the first few plays, the horses are drawn moving at speed. The rest of them, the horses are walking or stationary. And this grapple on the stirrup, I think it's in a scenario where there's multiple riders running around. Things are going to hell in a handbasket, and you just see a guy beside you that you realize isn't your friend. And he's dealing with someone who is your friend on the other side, and you simply go, oh, he's not looking. That's how that's employed. So again, there's a technique where you're now looking at it, and it works best in a multiple opponent scenario. So it shows the true colors of what Liberi is all about.
So then, you could say in the mounted section, everything's there. Just keep repeating. right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty much the
Clotheslines.
So going back to
logs.
Brian's question with the spear then, what else can you do?
With the spear,
Right, thinking about the context of what you just said, you don't have to actually show me it.
well, theoretically with the spear, you could do all kinds of techniques that you may have done with the sword. You can make crossings and exchanges in the same way. You can.
All along, that's the first time you actually said it.
I personally feel that the spear is point orientated. Really, that's where it's really, you know, you're going to come in and bash a guy. Yeah, it can give you time and distance. It can give you the ability to move in with the technique, but it's not really what it's designed for.
No.
But yes, yeah, you can do anything. You can do all those grapples. You come to in a situation, and I talked about this earlier, where in the staff play, where I get her spear off the line. Well, options are Leanna doesn't have a spear, but just my options are to back out and get to a distance where the spearhead is useful again. However, if you look at Liberi's system as a whole, it's probably, you probably can go out on a limb and say, I don't know if you would have advocated that. You're already in there, weapon's useless, you might as well drop it to the ground. Or use it to put your opponent into a key lock. Or go in and do that lower key or middle key, depending on how they're orientated on the weapon. So, sorry, I didn't follow the question.
It's at the end, so therefore, except before the mountain, that's the last thing, so it's kind of like the top, right?
Yeah, and it shows the least amount of techniques, because you're right. At this stage, you don't really, you know how to do this.
Okay.
Oh, by the way,
So, gentlemen, is there anything else that you want to see? John, is there anything else you want to show us?
no. I'm almost out of breath, so.
Okay, so at this point, we're going to adjourn for about 10 or 15 minutes while those that are going to fence prepare to fence. Those free scholars, provosts that want to engage with you. And I suggest that you also get prepared. Okay.